So just to let you know, this website is free. It has everything I've ever done in church planting on it. These slides are what I'm about to give you in the next 40 minutes. I usually spend an entire day of training, so I'm going to give you the shotgun approach to the 10 steps. But if you go on this website, it has the full thing. It has every handout that I've ever made for church planting, and there's other people besides me as well. So if you want any of this stuff, it's all on there, no problem at all. So now let me grab my computer. This one's just refusing to work, so we'll just do it off here. Alrighty. So what I'm doing right now is a process I call 10 Steps to Launching a Healthy New Church. This came about, it took 20 years to develop. And it's mainly because of mistakes I've made in church planting. So fortunately, mistakes can be something that is negative or positive. If when you make a mistake, you spend the time analyzing how you could do it better next time, it becomes very positive. So this is a process that I use to develop churches. And I'm very glad to see that it's been helpful to other churches. We've been testing this in several countries and around the U.S., and it's been going well. So I'm going to jump in. Again, I have very little time to try and give you this. It's usually a full day thing. But the first step always when planting a church is to know the community. The biggest problem that we have is that we are always trying to plant Adventist churches for Adventists. We're just transferring the culture of what we are to a new place. But what we don't realize is there was a day when that church was planted for that community, and it was designed for that community. It got stuck in the culture that it was in, and it kept doing the same thing even when the community changed. And now you're transplanting that culture that doesn't even meet the community's needs now into another community that doesn't even meet their needs either. We have to find ways to reach the people and know who they are. So this is the first thing I always do when I plant, is I plant a church that's focused on the harvest, not focused on the already saved. I want a church that's there for the people. Jesus tells us that he came to save the lost. Is that what he said? Yeah, exactly. We love the save part. We want to see those baptisms, right? Baptisms. We forget that Jesus said, I came to seek and save the lost. And so we actually have to be seekers of the lost. And so we need to get our churches, planting churches that are going out into the community, finding out who the people are, finding out what their needs are. You know, Christ's method alone, right? Mingled with the people as one who desired their good. He met their needs. He did all these things to build up this confidence in them. And so that they would have confidence in him, and then he said, come follow me. These are the kind of churches that we're called to plant. And so, unfortunately, most Adventists today don't even have non-Adventist close friendships. They don't even look to build friendships outside the church. It's very sad. And so we spend a lot of time how to understand a new community. There's a handout on that website that goes through details of how to do this. I don't have time to share with you, but I do tell you that 85% of my work in this first step is just doing a very simple survey. Do not carry a clipboard. Nobody wants to see somebody coming at them with a clipboard. So I just ask 3 simple questions. And I'm usually very conversational. People don't know I'm even doing a survey. And I just, somehow in a conversation I mentioned, we're starting a brand new ministry here in this community that's designed to help this community. But I need to know what the greatest needs are, so I make sure that we're doing things right. What would you say are the greatest needs of this community? Second question is, do you know anybody meeting those needs? I just want to find out. Maybe I don't need to focus on that. Somebody else is doing a great job on it. Or maybe I can partner with somebody. Or maybe they're doing it, but they're doing a horrible job. Who knows? Third question is, if they're engaged in the conversation, then I always say this. I say, I would like to partner with you in meeting this need. Would you be interested in that? Very simple, very quick. I do hundreds and hundreds of these surveys before I ever think about what the church is going to look like. Yes.
So do you record this data, or is it just all?
No, I always record it. I have a online database in my phone. You can do it any way you want. Google Docs, it works fine. A Google spreadsheet. So once I'm done speaking to somebody, as soon as I'm out of their site, I immediately download that information before I go to the next interview. But I don't try and analyze the information until I've done hundreds of these. I just did this. We just planting a church for the Chinese. The pastor's super introverted, and it's also culturally weird for them to go talk to strangers. He's done 300 plus interviews already, and just getting there, and he is so thrilled that he's done it. Yeah.
Repeat the second question you asked.
Do you know anybody?
Yeah. Do you know anybody who's meeting this need?
And the third one was what?
The third one is, would you like to partner with me? Yeah.
You say you had that in the website, right?
Yeah, but those three questions are, I think they're on there though. I mean, it's so simple.
Well, in the survey you have.
Well, it's no survey. I don't write it down on paper. It's all up here.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah. All right. So, second step. Once I know the community, then I begin to create my core values. Basically, core values are what guide your behavior within the church as well as how you interact with the world. Core values are who you are. So I can tell you real quickly what a core value is because you know what they are even if you don't think you do. What is the one thing that Walmart's known for? Cheap prices. There's their core value. That they always talk about. That's what they were going to be. We're going to be lower priced than anybody else. That's what we know about them. Their core value is low prices. So your core values are what kind of church you're going to be, who you are. And so there's actually 5 types of values. People get mixed up on this a little bit. There are gateway values. These are the things that every Adventist church shares in common, like the Sabbath, the doctrines, our 28 fundamental beliefs. Those aren't your core values. You can't be an Adventist church without those gateway values. If you say we're going to have, pork barbecue after church, you're probably not going to get to stay as a church, right? So don't list those as your core. Core values are what makes you unique. Why are you a unique Adventist church? We just talked about Walmart, a big store. But there's also Nordstrom's. They sell stuff. They're a big store. Aren't they just the same as Walmart? No, they're totally different, right? Because their core values are different. Their core values are high quality and customer service. And so they're totally different kinds of stores because they have different core values, even though they're both stores. So core values are what makes you unique. And this should be based on your community. Why are you unique for your community? What are you doing to impact that group you're trying to reach? Now, there are unintended values. These are usually negative things because of a core value, like Walmart. They have low prices, but they also have horrible customer service, right? That's not what they hoped for. They want to have good service, but to drive down prices, they have a skeleton staff. They don't train their people well. They pay people mostly part-timers, so they don't have to do, pay health insurance. So they don't have a highly motivated group. So when you go into, Walmart and they got 49,000, open registers and only 2 people running them, and you're standing in these huge long lines, right? Yeah. That's an unintended value. They kept their core values of being low price, but the negative thing is some people won't go there. Like my wife, she hates going to Walmart because she doesn't want to deal with huge lines. Huh?
Do they realize that?
Yeah, some people don't. Some people do. Some people don't. Like.
I mean, the administration. Do they realize that?
Oh yeah, of course they know. Yeah, they're
They're
not the biggest store in the world.
They're trying to compensate the provision.
Yeah, they just figure we're going to make tons of profit anyway. So it's just like Nordstrom's. What's their unintended value? You guys could tell this. Tell me, what is the unintended value of Nordstrom's?
Come away with an experience from shopping.
That's a good value. What's more a negative thing?
Price.
Price, yeah.
Yeah, less people. Than
Yeah, a lot of people, they're too expensive for people to shop at because they have very quality goods and their service is unbelievable. My wife will call up and say, I'm coming in, and they have a personal shopper waiting for her with like 6 or 7 different outfits in the dressing room waiting for her to come in. To walk in, they work with you through the entire process. Most people don't even know this is normal at Nordstrom's.
So at Walmart, they walk away from her.
Yeah, exactly. Walmart, yeah, they don't even want to talk to you. It's like you annoyed them if you say, can you help me? So target values are the things that this is usually what most churches say are their core values. Like, we're the friendliest church in the world. No, you're not. And how are you going to know if you were? A target value is usually something you aspire to be. You want to be, but it's not who you are. Maybe if you set a realistic target value, you can work on getting there. But most people have a crazy idea of who they really are. But core values are who you really are. So when you're developing a church plant, you want to create core values and build the culture so that is who you are. Does that make sense? Deception values, you don't have to really worry about that. That's more in politics. That's like when you say you're doing one thing, but it's actually exactly the opposite on purpose. So you title it, "We believe in this," while you're doing the exact opposite. All right? So step 3, very, very important one. This one drives me nuts. And it doesn't matter if you're a church planter or not. You should know this one. Let me ask you a question. How many disciples do you have in your church right now? Give me the number. Exactly what I hear all over the world. Yeah. Let me ask you another question. Does your church have a clear path for members to become disciples? What did Jesus say to make? Wait a minute, he said what?
Disciples.
We're supposed to make disciples? Yet we count stuff like baptisms, how many people are going into Sabbath school, our tithe. But the one thing Jesus said to go make is disciples. And we don't know. How do we know? I mean, how do you know if you're winning or losing? If you're doing the job, if we can't even, begin to guess what it looks like. So these are the 3 areas that I focus on when I am building a discipleship pathway. But you do whatever you want, biblically, of course, to create that pathway. These are the things that I've found that disciples look like. They're mission-minded. They have a focus on the work that Christ called us to do. They want to grow spiritually. They want to grow in excellence. They want to be more useful for the kingdom of God. And they want community. They want to love each other. They want to be in unity as brothers and sisters in Christ. And they want to work in the community as well. So these things are what we work towards. And we actually have a process. When you plant a church, build this in before you launch. If you do this, try to do this after you launch, it's rare you'll ever do it. If you create this process beforehand, that's when you're going to have the best success. I'm going to talk about this more in another presentation. So I've done these groundwork now, these 3 areas. I know my community. I understand who they are, what their needs are. I've developed my core values based on the needs of the community, what kind of church that we're going to be. I have developed a pathway to discipleship for new people. When they walk in, they're not going to just be baptized. We're going to grow them into strong disciples for Jesus. Now I take all that information and I create a proposal. This is a very detailed document. We have examples on this website, cpexchange.net, so that you can see that. And this is just kind of a blueprint to show us what kind of church we're going to be so we can follow that blueprint as we're building it. I also can share this with the conference. It gives the conference tons of confidence when I'm coming up with them with 10-page, 15-page, well-written, well-organized proposal about who we are, where we're going to meet, what's the demographics of the people, what are their greatest needs, how are we going to meet those needs, how are we going to build disciples, what are we looking, all these different questions are answered in this document. Then I shrink that document into bullet points in a one-page document, which is also a different handout you can get on cpexchange.net. And so it's all there. Again, it's all for free. I don't get anything for you downloading it. You can use it whenever you want. So we create this, though, so that we can also move forward as a group. Now we know who we are. Now I can start building a team. So I hear a lot of you say you're building a team. Praise God. But I don't even start reaching out to anybody till I get done with those first 4 steps. I don't talk to anybody because I do more what's called parachute church planting, which is I go into an area without a mother church and launch. Not everybody does that. That's more unusual. But that's why I go by myself. But if I had a team, say I was coming out of a church, planting a church, I would keep that team as small as possible. The people I knew were on that focus and do those first 4 steps. Yeah.
So what you just said here, you don't build your team until you have these first 4 steps. So you have this proposal, you've done the research, you've done all the grunt work, so to speak.
Right.
Then you start saying to Liz, hey Liz, would you like to be part of this?
Well, that is step 5. Yeah, good question. All right. So one of the reasons that I have that information sheet, that bullet pointed small sheet, is so that I can begin to recruit a team. And I use a different process. I don't want just anybody. I never say, hey, who wants to come and join this church plant? Because you could be attracting a lot of the wrong people. I mean, there is a lot of people that you could be attracting that are not the kind of people you're looking for. You can get people who want to control a church. Ever met anybody like that? Yeah. They think, man, a church plant, I can control that thing. You get people who have maybe weird doctrinal beliefs. And so they're trying to press their own ideas into this new church plant. You've got people who don't like, whatever, administrative or whatever. There's a ton of different reasons why people might be drawn. But they also, usually the biggest thing is they're great people. They just have a different vision. They do not follow the values that this church is going to have. They see church going a different direction. And so what I'm trying to do is develop a core team that shares that same vision. We're going the same direction. If I don't know what that direction is first, how am I going to recruit the right people? That's why I do the groundwork first before I begin building the team. Then when I begin recruiting, I can share with them the direction that this new church is going, that we're heading this way. These are how we're going to reach these people. This is what we are going to become as members. I tell them all of these different things. So how do I find these people? I use what's called an interview process. And basically this is, I'll just give you an example. What was your name again?
Mitz.
M-I-T-Z. I'll call you up. Hi, Mitz. This is Pastor Steve Letty. Listen, I'm starting a brand new church in your community. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. I don't want to try and recruit you, though. I just want to share the information with you. And can I treat you to a lemonade at Starbucks and just give you the idea about what we're doing? Because you may know some people who are really excited about this. It's never pressure. If they say no, they say no. It's very simple, quick conversation. Usually they're like, who are you again? How did you get my name? So I'll explain a little bit more. But all I'm doing is wanting to sit down, and usually sit down for about an hour to an hour and a half. Yeah.
Does this person needs to be a Christian believer?
No.
Seventh-day? No, not at all.
They don't have to be anything. Doesn't matter what they have. I've had atheists on my core team, Muslims on my core team, tons of non-Adventists on my core team. Usually it's about a third active Adventists, about a third former Adventists, and about a third non-Adventists, typically. But every church is a little bit different. Depends on your area. So let me give you a quick example of this. The first time I did this was about 16 years ago. This was again because of a mistake. The church before, I let anybody become part of the core team. We grew a church in a year and a half. We had over 270 people in attendance. We were thriving, growing, active church. But the core team leaders wanted to have a small church. They were thinking about going a different way. They wanted to control a small church. And they didn't like how big we were getting and how many new leaders we were training. They were losing control. And so one of them was mega rich, went to the conference office and said, "It's my money or him. Get rid of him or you lose my money." And she was the richest person in the conference. And so they said, "Well, we'll keep your money." And then when I left, they lost 100 people, not just out of that church, but they chased them out of the Adventist church.
Wow.
And that was my fault because I didn't know to build the core team right. So the next time I was like, I'm not doing that again. We are picking people that have the right vision. So that's how I developed this. So the first time I sat down with somebody was a guy named Jesse, 21-year-old guy. And I didn't know anybody in town, but the conference sent me a guy to help me who knew 7 people. He was new in conference too. He didn't know very many people. So I sat down with this guy named Jesse, and I explained what the church was going to be like. I learned a lot about him. It's more of a conversational thing. It's not, we call it an interview, but it's not really. They don't know it's an interview. I'm just trying to get to know them. I'll share what we're doing, ask for feedback. What do you think about that? But Jesse was pretty stoic. It was hard to read him. But I did find out that this guy was super talented. He was an artist. He did videos. He'd won the Seattle Film Festival already at 21. And I just said, "Jesse, man, God has really blessed you with a lot of gifts. Would you ever consider using those gifts to glorify God and help us build this church plant?" And then I'll never forget, and it's happening right now, like every time, his response gives me goosebumps. He said, "You have my life." And I was shocked. In fact, I thought I heard him wrong. I said, "What?" And he goes, "You have my life." He was so excited to be part of a mission like this.
Amen.
He had been in a church his whole life, never been involved. Later I found out he was actually looking to leave Christianity. He thought it had nothing to do for him, nothing for him at all. He'd been part of a big organized church that just ignored him. And so he wasn't kidding, though. He quit his job and got another job so he'd have more time to spend with us. He was giving us 40 hours a week on average to help us plant this church. I trained him to do these interviews too. And so how I grow the church is through this interview process, because we always ask these 3 questions at the very end. So when I was talking to Jesse, I did this to him as well. We'll use him as example still. I said, "Jesse, I really want you on this core team, but it's not up to me. The Bible says that God builds his church. So what I want you instead to ask you to do is, would you please pray for the next week? Pray earnestly that God directs you. And if he wants you part of this, then I'll be happy. If he tells you to go somewhere else, we'll be happy with you. And we'll see God leading you somewhere else. That's fine. But we want to make sure that this is God's decision." And so then the second thing I say is, obviously Satan just heard what we were doing and he's not happy with this. And so I'm going to ask you, if you would, please pray for us. Pray that we're protected and that we stay on God's path. And then finally, and this is how I grow the church, I said, "Jesse, I just got here. I don't know enough people to grow a church by myself. But now you've heard what we are doing. And certainly you know people who would be excited about this. If you would, pull out your phone. Let's go through that list. And if you could, share with me some names. We won't pressure them, but share some names with me right now that we can share this good news with as well." And so people who we are interviewing are giving us names. And so again, I went there, knew nobody. In about 4.5 month time, we interviewed over 220 people. We chose a core team of 77 out of those 220 people. And then 5 months later, we launched a church at 212. This is, again, going into an area I knew no one. This process works very well. We've been using this time and time again. My friend in Maryland who did it, the first one who tried it after I did it, he launched at 313. But he had a mother church, so that helped him. We did it first time in New York when I was working in New York. I just moved to Potomac from Greater New York Conference. They launched at 200 the first try. And we just did this in Bulgaria. No. This was Bulgaria, yeah. And they had 125, which is a miracle in that country. No, it wasn't Bulgaria. Where was it? Anyway, Eastern Europe, somewhere. No, it was in Sofia. That's where it was. Sofia, yeah. I was trying to remember which city it was in. So anyway, the Orthodox Church is crazy there. You can't even plant a church without their permission. And it's against the law to rent to any church besides the Orthodox Church. So imagine having those. Yeah, and if you are not Orthodox, everybody in the community thinks you're a cult. That's just their culture. They think there's only the Orthodox Church or you're atheist. Nothing else makes sense to them. And they launched a church of 125. I think they said it's the second largest church in their conference to start. Just boom, right off the bat. So these things work well if you follow a system. You don't have to follow the system. This is just what we use. So that's kind of our foundational. Is there any questions about those first 5 steps? Then I'll continue otherwise. All right, good. Step 6. Now you start developing a team. Yes?
It takes us a second to process. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
New England is very peculiar, and as you know, because everywhere I go, I mention that it's the most secular area in the world, and we haven't seen that here. My church plant didn't start like that.
Right.
So, in that context of just very secular, very difficult, I know you were on the West Coast where Dustin comes from. What was your experience doing that in a very secular area?
That's where I started, this West Coast, yeah. Yeah, at the time, Seattle and Portland were the 2 most secular cities in the nation when I started this. I actually think it's easier, honestly. I think it's easier in a secular area than in the Bible Belt because people are more open to weird stuff.
Not only that, the Bible, we already set up our mind.
Yeah. You're not stuck in a culture.
Exactly.
And the Sabbath's not a big deal. They don't care because they weren't raised in the church. Sunday's not their culture. And so, it doesn't matter to them. They just want to be in part of a movement. And so if you create the team right, people get excited. That's why I had atheists and other non-Christian religions join us because they were excited about the vision and the mission to the community and becoming truly a people who love each other and work together. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
I don't want to take you down too far because we could break this down for hours, but just maybe 30 seconds, a process for some of those types of people, atheists, Muslim, whatever, how they dealt with the spiritual aspect of what you were doing.
Well, when I'm interviewing them, now most people who are atheists or Muslim, they're usually coming in because they're connected with somebody on the core team. It's not like you usually get somebody saying, hey, I've got an atheist friend who would love this church.
Yeah.
That's not a normal thing that happens. And if you call an atheist up, they usually aren't saying, yeah, I want to take me to Lemonade and share about your new church. But it's more usually they're connected with somebody. But we tell them right up front that this is an Adventist church. And, but we talk about who Jesus was. And the Jesus that we're seeing in churches is not the Jesus of the Bible. That Jesus was a servant. He wasn't there to be a politician. He wasn't trying to take over the world. He was trying to love people. He came to serve, not to be served. And that's the kind of church we're going to be. And so that's what attracts them, is they want to be part of that. And so, but we do spiritual things, and eventually they become Adventists. That's what we anticipate will happen. Yeah.
Time frame. I've been thinking about the time frame to do that. The 5 steps.
From A to Z.
Okay, because
Yeah.
you said it's 10 step,
Right.
but by the 5th is when you start recruiting.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to
Yeah.
say.
So for me, I get the first 4 steps. You're never going to be able to do it like I do because I've done it for
No,
20
yeah,
some years.
Exactly.
I get the first 4 steps done in about a month. So it'll take most people a lot longer than that. But I've been doing this so much. And I literally, those interviews that I'm doing, that continues in the 5th step. So I'm not saying that ends in a month. That's just, it's beginning in a month. And I get up to, when I start training my team is when I have a team of about 8 to 10. But I expect that team to be growing much, much greater in the process. Yeah.
Speak to the situation. So for some of us, for myself, already recruited, half my core team, but I can vet that they've been involved with me in the
Right.
local church and mission and stuff like that. But we haven't, Bill, that's one of the things we're realizing we need to study the Tacoma community and
Yeah.
find out the specific needs. Is that, what would you suggest being mindful of? Already having, I know they're good leaders, so
Right.
they're not power hungry or anything like that. That I know they're not going to cause problems.
Right.
But we do need to come on the same page. What would you suggest for, since doing step 6 before doing step?
Yeah, I would say if I had a team like that, I would work with them and just get an agreement before we go in the community saying, we want to be a church that has the same vision. And so I assume we're all going to have the same vision, but it's okay if somebody doesn't. We just have to agree that we're going to stay on vision. If somebody thinks it should go a different way, they just step back voluntarily.
Or they plant their own church?
Yeah, they plant their own church or just come once we launch.
Okay.
So you can have people with different vision once you launch, but you don't want them at the core team stage because the core team develops the DNA of a church. They become who you are as a church. So you don't want people taking you different directions. You want to stay the same direction. I really can't answer any more questions till the end because I will never get through this otherwise. I've got 12 minutes to get you the last 5 steps. All right, training your team. Well, fortunately, we're going to go over this in detail today, so you don't have to worry about getting much more than that. Just we spend a lot of time training the team. I will go over this one tomorrow. How do you build your impact ministries? How do you activate ministries in the church before you start? Let me just give you a caveat. Just because I can get a church launched in 10 months doesn't mean you should do it in 10 months. Take all the time you need. Get it strong and healthy before you launch, and you'll be doing much better once you launch. So basically that's just ensuring your ministries are running well before your grand opening. All right, so this one also we're going to go over in detail today. This is the 5-month pre-launch process. And so once I develop this core team, I'll have a number in mind that I want to hit. Let's say it's 40. I want to have a team of 40 before I launch. I have core people. Then I start this 5-month process to make my church bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'll explain that in detail. But that step alone will triple the size of your church. If you do that step, your church will grow. And that's why we're launching large.
There's a whole presentation on that.
Yeah, that one's coming later today, yeah. So, great grand opening. Okay, so now I've done all these steps. I've developed the foundational steps. I know who the community is. I know what my values are. I've developed this discipleship process. I've created my proposal. I've started recruiting my team and training my team and launching ministries before we launch a church. And finally doing this 5-month pre-launch, everything's leading to this public grand opening. Don't just do any old grand opening. It is a mistake because you're going to attract attention if you do it right. And you want to be able to capture the people who come. So market. Everybody needs to bring people. Do as much marketing as you can. Connect to anybody you can in any way you can. Let people know about your grand opening. And don't be stupid about it. Oh my goodness, I've seen some really dumb church plants out there. I went to, fortunately it wasn't an Adventist one. There was one in my neighborhood when I was living in Seattle. I got this nice postcard about their grand opening. I walked into this school and there was nobody there to greet me. and I didn't know where to go. And so I'm wandering around the school. I finally found them in their cafeteria. And they're still setting up as they're supposed to be starting, getting the last chairs and getting everything together. And then they have like this puppet show behind 2 trash cans.
Oh, boy.
That's their thing they're hiding behind, 2 trash. I was like, what are they doing? Then when the pastor gets up to do the sermon, he says, all right, we're now in week 2 of our sermon series. I'm like, what? This is the grand opening weekend, and it's week 2 of my sermon series? Oh, they did not last long. No.
We don't want you to be unethical, but can you give us the name of the church and the name of the pastor who did that?
No, I don't know. I don't remember. It was not an Adventist church, but man, that was dumb. So a lot of churches, they plan on having this big opening, and they do well. I've seen a lot of churches launch large, but they don't know how to get them to come back. So this step, what I do is I do a sermon about the way that our church is serving the community. And I tie it into a message about how Jesus served people. And my favorite story in the Bible is the story of blind Bartimaeus. I love that story. I absolutely love it. So I talk about Jesus, and I paint a picture of Jesus walking down this road, give him the smells of the animals and the dust kicking up and the sounds of people pressing in. Like Jesus is a rock star now, right? Everybody wants to get close to Jesus. You know, his disciples are probably surrounding him to keep him safe from the crush of the crowd. Kids are running around screaming, and there's this beggar sitting at the side of the road. And he hears Jesus is coming, and he starts screaming for Jesus. And the people tell him to shut up. So what does he do? He screams even louder for mercy. And the gospel for me, who God is what Jesus did when the Bible says Jesus stopped. I mean, so many people pressing on him. He had this mission he was going to fulfill. All these things could have been on his mind. But a blind beggar screaming for mercy makes God stop. And then I say this, that's what we are about. We are here in this community to stop for their needs, to reach out to these people. It is not about being busy. It's about loving people who need us. And so then I start talking about the ministries. I explain how each ministry is going to serve the needs of the people of that community. And when I talk about a ministry, I ask the ministry leader to stand up and I introduce them. I say, this is, Jonathan, this is Ricardo, this is Deborah, whoever it is, of the different ministries. And I talk about how those ministries will impact the community. And we set up banners around wherever we're meeting that have the name of that ministry on them. So let's say this one here says children's ministry, and I've introduced Deborah as the leader. And then once I introduce her, everybody claps and thanks her. Then she just goes and she silently goes and stands right next to the banner that says children's ministries on it. At the end, we have practiced all of this. At the end of the sermon, we don't have a lot of stuff. It's real quick. A very short prayer, no music, nothing else. Because what we want to do is we want to have people go to those banners. So we invite people to go speak to the leader of the ministry that spoke most to their heart. And that they have something to share with you. When people begin to crowd around, each leader has 2 assistants with cards in their hands. And these have very simple ministries, easy jobs to do in that ministry. Like children's ministry, she would have craft leaders, people who could put together crafts for kids, something very simple. But we want everybody in that room to walk out with a ministry. I don't care who they are. If they're atheists, I don't care. I don't care if they're Muslim, whatever. They're not going to be running a Sabbath school, of course. They're not going to be leading things and teaching things. But they can be helping with hospitality work. They can be helping with lots of stuff. And so we want everybody to be signed up before they leave. And so we have a process to do that so that people are captured, and that will keep way more people coming back than if you just said, oh, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you next week, like most church plants do. Yeah.
If you just go back there. So
Okay.
Just about this. There.
Again, all this is online. You get everything online. Yeah. So here's the 10 steps so far. Understand your community, list your core values, know your goals for members, that's discipleship, create a proposal and information sheet, start interviewing people to build a team, train that team, build your ministries before you launch. Once you have a team as big as you need for core, start this 5-month process before you launch, and then have a great grand opening. And then finally, step 10, multiplication. Do it again. Launch pregnant. We always tell the core teams at the very beginning, we are not starting a church, we're starting a movement. This is just the first of many. And I tell them, I am not, somebody here already said that, it's perfect. I am not here to pastor you, I'm here to equip you to lead this church. I'm going to go leave and start another one. You're going to lead this church. And so, multiplication, we even do this for very first service. We talk about how we're here to serve this community, but there's a lot of communities not being served. So our very first service, we take an offering for the next church plant so that we can serve another community in the future. So multiplication, this is what it looks like. Members bring in new members, leaders train new leaders, disciples make new disciples, and churches plant new churches. This is God's pathway to growing his church. This is what he gave the Adventist church. This is what we're called to do. And so we teach multiplication all the time. All right? So I have a couple minutes. Any questions?
Could you put it back to
No.
Question that I had before was just, when you're doing your not interviews, but interviews, let's say when you're inviting people to participate, what is the rate of rejection you have been experienced?
So, like I said, last one, the one I did in Seattle, first one, I mean, not the last one, interviewed 220 people. We took 77 as core, so it's about a third. And a lot of it is people say, I'm too busy, I don't want to. But I'm looking for red flags. Like, I know when people are here for consumerism rather than mission. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to want to grow this direction. So red flags are, what kind of music are you going to play? I always say, why do you ask? Because maybe it's a missional. Maybe they say, well, I think our churches are so outdated, and if we're reaching young adults, I don't think this is going to work, or whatever they say. But usually it's because they say, well, I only want a church that has this kind of music. We might have that exact music, but they're not going to be part of my core team.
exactly.
Because they're thinking about a church for them, not a church for the community.
Comfortable.
Yeah. So we don't want that type of person. So we're looking for those things when I'm talking to them. But yeah. Any other questions? I got time for one more. Yeah, that was a shotgun approach to the 10 step. And so we'll be giving some of these steps to you in detail throughout the day. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Good.